The village. A collection of dwellings, smaller than a town, usually having a church. Islip, the Celtic name for water.
I'm now standing where this village began. It grew because they gained control of these two rivers. That's the Cherwell and the Ray.
Dinosaur bones have been found here. Romans built villas, which came and went, as did the forests.
It's not because we wear clothes we can call ourselves sane. It's not because we can speak that we have a name. We with my gifts can choose to deny them.
Islip. Not so long ago, a quiet, self-sufficient village full of shops. Children played in the streets.
We're not entirely sure where the village got its name, Islip.
How has our particular collection of dwellings become a place to pass through rather than stop at? Maybe, like believing in fairies, if we don't all clap our hands together, nothing happens.
I live in one of the oldest houses in the village. In the 16th century, it was a coaching inn called the King's Head. I would love to have been a fly on the wall, watching a coach with 6 horses passing under this beam and through to the stables in the back. There's a lot that's original and much that isn't.
The King's Head, the Swan, the Boot, Britannia, Saddler's Arms, Prince's Arms, Worcester Arms, Plumes and Feathers, Fox and Grapes, and the Red Lion, they saw visitors of all sorts. Elizabeth I, possibly Shakespeare.
Travellers could come in, sit by the fire, warm up after the first stage of their journey to the north. Fireplace in every room, lots of food, and not too much money. Cheers.
When I was about 12, I was on Islip Bridge on a stagecoach with 6 horses pulled up, and the bloke said, "If I give you a bucket, will you fetch me some water, lad?" So I fetched them 6 buckets of water for each a bucket for each horse. And then he gave me a florin. Should never forget that.
In Saxon times, Islip was a small town known for its fish, its game from neighbouring Otmore, and its priceless ford across the river. Edward the Confessor was born here to Emma of Normandy and Ethelred the Witless. They had a royal lodge, presumably for hunting. Just before Edward's death, he gave Islip away. He gave the village to his Abbey of Westminster. Our rectors are still chosen and tithes still paid under laws from that time.
It all belongs to church commissioners. They own nearly all the village, all the land in the village, all the farmland. Yeah. Except I think it's just an odd little field.
Edward III granted a charter for a fair every year, October the 12th to the 16th. I'm not sure why we don't continue the tradition.
And all the farmers around the countryside, Noak, Oddington, Chilton, Fencott and Mercott, they'd bring their produce and put it on there and it would be sold about once a month. That was the Islip market.
They used to say, when Oxford was a village, Islip was a town.
At the top of the village, there was a sweet shop. That was Mrs. Washbrook, kept that. And then, of course, we had the butcher down North Street and our shop. We had a blacksmith, did a very nice baker, good baker, and coalman. But then most villages had their own shops. They were nearly all self-sufficient, weren't they?
The market came to an end when the last village store closed down.
It was pretty good for us all until the late 70s, early 80s, when the supermarket started coming about in the 80s. I mean, I was quite lucky because I hadn't got staff, so I could cope and be competitive as I could, you know. But like when the supermarket started coming about, that killed everything, didn't it? The baker it killed, the butcher.
It was all done here. There was Smith's Stores. That was a big shop when I first remember it. You could buy hardware, almost a suit of clothes.
Well, this shop we used and did up orders in here, and we had the big provision counter along this wall. You can see where the stone wall is, that was all tiled. And we delivered all round the villages to Fencott, Mercott, Charlton and Oddington.
There was work from many more than just farmers. Weavers, doctors, blacksmiths, barmen, butchers, coopers, tanners, teachers, prostitutes, maltsters, cleaners, cooks, maids, grooms, and postmen. They could all make a living here. Cromwell found Islip thriving. It fed his battle against the Royalists to seize control of Oxford, which had become a centre of learning and headquarters for King Charles. Cromwell watched the battle from the top of the church tower. It was bad for the church, which was set on fire and partly destroyed. The Roundheads were ferried across the river by a local farmer, Mr. Beckley. In return, Parliament granted the Beckleys exclusive fishing rights to the two rivers. With the backing of Charles II, Robert South, probably our most prominent rector, brought learning and money to the village. He rebuilt the church.
And he decided he'd build the rectory here, which I think must have been common land where people could graze their animals. And you can see, in fact, that it's got a lot of barns and outbuildings. I suppose some would have been for carriages and horses, but at least one of them was, we've still got a large tithe barn, and that's where everybody had to pay tithes to the church for their land.
The commons, no longer for the commoners, were fenced. This poster, created by a local wit, encouraged insurrection.
There was a leather maker in Charlton and Otwell who used to make very, very strong gloves. And people used to go out at night when there was a full moon. They'd actually destroy the hedges and break down defences of the enclosure. And so there was a troop of soldiers was brought to Islip to control them. But they never managed to catch them until they offered a reward. And then somebody gave their names and they caught them in the act. Somebody knew they were going to do it. And they were all brought to Islip and they were actually put in our barn overnight as prisoners. And they were all put in a farm cart and taken into Oxford to go to the court. But everybody from Otmore had gone into Oxford for the St Giles's Fair, and as the troop of soldiers came with the cart, they all started pelting the soldiers with rotten apples and bad tomatoes and eggs, and the rioters managed to escape and get back to their homes again before they were tried.
Hang the man and flog the woman who stole the goose from off the common. Let the greater villain loose who steals the common from the goose.
We used to go down there to get a goose, you see, because geese used to fly in. We went up once. We came home with this blooming bird, and when we got it home, it was dead, of course. It was a swan, it wasn't a goose.
Oh, no.
So we ate it just the same. I mean, if it was good enough for the Queen's table, it was good enough for us.
Rules. Rules and regulations. A toll gate was built to control the road. 6pence every time a coach went through. The ford was closed. The Red Lion became a court of law and the centre of commerce. Land and property were sold to newcomers. There were taxes on beer and on windows. This caused the people to brick themselves in, but thankfully not to stop drinking, and some of the inns and jobs survived. New roads drew custom elsewhere. A different kind of traveller came visiting. One of the very first balloonists was an Englishman. He landed near Islip on October the 4th, 1784. From London they came for the beauty of the countryside.
The road to Islip is through rich agricultural country. We cross a bridge, a massive, well-built stone structure. One is tempted to linger on it and watch the great numbers of freshwater fish that seem to regard it as a resting place.
The Oxford Canal opened. Silent barges were towed by horses. Then, quite suddenly, steam. Fuel and goods sped along on trains.
Islip Station at one time was a very, very busy station. There was a station master, 2 signalmen and 3 people who worked in the yard. Right. Always. Because there was all the coal came in. That's the coal, isn't it? And all the hay went out. And straw and all that sort of thing used to go out, and people handled that. Because in those days, people with money would buy a truck of coal, which weighed 20 ton of coal.
This was the waiting room here. That was my father's office. These are the toilets here. That was a room, don't know what they used that for. Not a lot, I think. There was a weighbridge there. And of course they brought the animals into here and then into the cattle trucks, and off they went. And they sent a lot of stuff through here. I've been doing it for about the last 3 years, on and off, mostly off, and mostly late in the evening after I finished painting.
And what prompted
usually until about, just that I felt it ought to be done, you know, before everybody's forgotten what it used to be like. Because it's very different now to what it was in these days.
And the next war came to Islip to steal the villagers away.
23rd Legion's dead. Dead in the first year of this damned campaign. The Legion's dead. Dead and won't rise again. The writer, Robert Graves, lived in this house World's End.
We never locked our houses in those days. You'd got nothing for anybody to pinch, it was worth money. But he came over this night and he sat down to supper and we had the same as we had. He said, I went to Oxford this morning and I bought myself some kippers. He said, and your bloody Felix got in through the window and ate them. So I thought, bugger it, I'll go to supper.
All the ex-servicemen had the chance of land, and nearly all of them in those days, a little bit of land to come back to was all they wanted.
The war to end all wars left gaps in families that needed replacing. The village women rose to the occasion. The hopeful 20s. Tea and sandwiches at Islip Cricket Club, served by the WI.
When I was a boy, there was no cars. There were only 3 cars in the village until about 1927. There was Steele the builder, the doctor. There was no electricity. About the same time, the first telephones came to the village.
Electricity had only just come to Islip, so Charlton and Fencott and Mercott and those villages didn't have electricity. So we used to have big deliveries of paraffin, and we used to deliver it out to the villages. And, you know, in emergencies, the other villagers with cars used to rally round and help.
Dark days. The women were on their own again.
I hadn't ever had anything to do with the shop. I didn't really know anything about it until the war started and the men left who worked in the shop, and so I had to help. I had a big baking machine at this end because I can remember Howard standing there and turning a handle, and I suddenly saw it coming towards him and went and grabbed him and it went through the floor.
We had a land girl living for quite a long time in, and amongst that some prisoners of war that we had, well, they weren't living in, but we used to give them, well, wife used to boil them some potatoes and gravy and help them a bit and keep them in a good mood. And it was a case of if you didn't keep them in a good mood, you didn't get much work done.
In the olden days, you see, there was a lot of thatch. And the man that lived in the house that looks down the walk,
Right.
that used to be the fireman, the chief of the fire brigade. He'd only got one leg. But they used to ring the bells, and the people who were involved used to go. And they didn't put many houses out, but they stopped them from burning other houses down.
Islip became the home for many new faces, some of whom stayed. The Swan opened its clubroom as a classroom for 71 children. The village became a playground for all sorts of adventures and discoveries for future generations.
There's some tunnels under the village. I don't think I ever went down it. I wasn't brave enough. And the drain cover is behind the church, and it was rumoured to go across Church Square, to one of the cottages there.
The children put up a picture of Herr Hitler. They were asked, "How tall is Hitler and where does he live?" They answered, "He comes up to here, sir, and he lives over there."
During the war, that was when there were such big changes. And they paid £2 an acre for ploughing up grass. And that's when there was such a lot of drainage done and the grass fields were ploughed up. They reckoned a man could plough an acre a day with a pair of horses. But today, they can go and plough almost 50 acres a day.
Then the Americans came. The beer concession at the Saddler's Arms saw them well lubricated, as did the fuel dump they built.
That was a massive storage place, much bigger than one realises, or much bigger than we were told or led to believe. And they got everything, the Yanks. They got sweets, nylons. And the village was good to them because they made them very welcome.
End of war forever. Solid victory. We're in control again. Expansion was necessary. Did it change things?
Oh yes, it's changed a lot. I think it was much nicer before. I hate all the curbings and things around the roads. It used to be so lovely, and all the signs and everything, but it's just traffic really that's spoiled it.
Since the invention of the combustion engine, traffic has steadily built up in this arterial road. And in fact, quite a lot of damage has been caused to these old walls.
On the motor, beep, beep, meow. Beep, beep, meow, meow. Greenhouse gases, greenhouse gas. Road jam reaching critical mass. Up in heaven there's a hole. I got to the city but I lost my soul. On the motor, beep, beep, meow.
It's got so much worse, and now, of course, I suppose it's people going through to the motorway, probably people coming through this way to go to Birmingham, that way to go to London. It's just a rat race, isn't it? Especially on Friday evening.
The Ray and the Cherwell rose to illustrate exactly who is in control.
I wish I had myself a horse. You can't grow rhubarb from exhaust. I wish I'd listen to my old dad. Said 2 wheels good and 4 wheels bad. On the motor, beep, beep, eow. Beep, beep, eow, eow. If I ever get back to Lover's Lane, I'm never gonna take this road again.
With Class 1, then Class 2.
Islip is certainly a collection of dwellings, but its real life is in its people.
Say what you will, the countryside is still the only place where I was settled down. Traffic there is so much rarer out of town.
Okay, what do you think about Islip?
I think it's rubbish because there's hardly anything to do.
Ah, I think it rocks.
There are still many people who believe that our heritage can be rebuilt.
And some of the volunteers are absolutely wonderful because they actually get the children to try and work out how much change they should be having, you know, and they get them to add up small amounts as well.
Of course, there is one very special building in the village, the loss of which could make me move on. See you down the pub.
I've been right through the hoop, the whole milking by hand, but things have changed so much.
I miss meeting the people. I feel very nostalgic if I come back to the village or the house where I used to live, you know. I feel that it was a lovely childhood, and yet I do feel a bit sad in a way, you know.
A little bit of love and understanding goes a long, long way. A little bit of love and understanding goes a long, long way. Reach out. Reach out. Time, you created time so that you would not have enough. Time, you created time so that you would not have enough. A little bit of love and understanding goes a long, long way. A little bit of love and understanding